Chrysler has said that one of the great joys in his life is to play the Brahms violin concerto, the slow movement, when Léon Goossens is playing the oboe part. Can you recall performances of that work with Chrysler?
Oh, yeah, I don't think I could ever forget them, because, I mean, any performance with Chrysler is something which I would remember all my life, because I used to think that it was the greatest thing I'd heard. He was a magnificent artist. And I always remember how touched I was at his treatment, not only of the concerto he was playing, the Brahms concerto, but in my presence there. Because whenever we played it together, and we played it quite a few times, he always stood aside at the beginning of the slow movement and half turned back from the audience, and obviously, you know, listening to the music. And then at the end of the movement, he would always give me just a little bow like that before he went on with the finale. And I was terribly thrilled. But I enjoy the orchestra. Even now sometimes I do it and love every minute of it. Partly because of this beautiful sound of all the other instruments around you, and knowing that you're an integral part of this sound. And partly because of the company of all these people there. I mean, I can speak freely because I've been in it now for, well over 50 years. And they're the friendliest lot of people you'll ever meet. And you will know they'll never let you down. They're marvelous.
Can you name some of the colleagues and orchestras that you worked with?
Oh, I couldn't. But I could give you the orchestral directory, and I think I could say, well, those are the ones, because there's so many of them. I couldn't pick any out. You know, they're lovely. My own department, naturally, I'm very fond of, and we work together just hand in glove like that, you see.
But of course, you've taught many of the members in your own department, many of whom have become the top orchestral players of today. Do you like to teach?
I've enjoyed teaching tremendously because I've been very fortunate in the people I've taught. Not only during the time when I was teaching them, but now, when I hear the fruits of my efforts. I could name so many of them. I wouldn't mind mentioning one or two now, because I think I'm so lucky to be able to do so. One is Evelyn Rothwell, as we all know, Lady Barbarolli. Then we have Helen Gaskell, who's been with the BBC Orchestra for a long, long time, and her pupil, Janet Craxton. Then we have Terence McDonough and Sutcliffe, and people like that. They've given me back so much and repaid me. And I get such a thrill just listening to them play now, because I realize that all the things I've tried to teach them, they've grasped and they've held on to them, and they've added to those and just made that little improvement, and I'm very content. Thank you very much.
What's the reason for the fact that a very high percentage of his pupils are women?
Well, I don't know, but I think that he's a very fascinating man, and I think that must have inspired a lot of women to take up the instrument. Many of them became his pupils.
There seems to be a higher percentage of women oboe players in this country than in any other in the world. Is this due to Goossens?
I think it must be very largely due to Goossens, and the fact that having started in the country to have many women oboes, so this trend goes on, and it doesn't, like in other countries, they've never heard of women playing the oboe. And in Russia, even, where women do everything and drive the buses and sweep the streets, they think perhaps a woman oboe player is rather unladylike.
Were you all allocated instruments, or did you choose these unusual ones yourselves?
No, we didn't choose them. We just were told to do it, and we did
yes.
it.
You were the one left the last, I think.
Yes. Well, Leon, of course, was just told that he was going to play an oboe, and he played it.
Our futures were planned very much by my grandfather, who was quite a demon, you see where that went. In fact, people always say, what made you take up the oboe? Well, it wasn't I at all. It was not my father even. It was my grandfather. He said, Eugène, if you have children, he said, teach them to play instruments that are not usual, not, you know, so many people take the violin and the piano. Teach them something quite different, and it'll be more interesting from them, from their point of view. So my father said, right, well, one of them shall play the French horn, and the other shall play the oboe. So to get me accustomed to this fact, without saying so much, he used to take us to the opera performances when he was conducting the Carl Rosa, and we were up in Liverpool. And whenever the oboe had a passage to play which sounded very interesting, a lovely little solo, as so many of the operas have, there was somebody in the box who was instructed to tap me on the shoulder and say, listen to this. And I got so accustomed to listening to this, you see, that every time the oboe came in, I started saying, there's the oboe again. And eventually, when he suggested that I might like to play that instrument myself, I leapt at the opportunity, you see.
Did you, as a young student, find that you had to practice a great deal?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I had my timetable. My father, although he was on tour, I felt there was a remote control coming from him all the time, you see. And my mother was at home, who just saw to it that I carried out the instructions, you see. And sometimes, I know, she used to hear strange tones which didn't come from the oboe at all. Actually, they came from a model railway I had, and I just used to switch it on when I got a bit bored, you see.
We went to stay with a cousin of mother's in Beaumaris in Anglesey. And of course, the boys had to take their instruments. We couldn't because the harps were too awkward to take, but they had to take their instruments because they must keep their lips in. Well, they managed that very well, and they played beautifully, but if you went in the room, you could see that they were not only playing, but one was looking out of field glasses and the other out of a telescope across the Menai Straits watching the ships.
When he had his first engagement, I think he was paid £0.50 for that.
Yes, and then they asked him if he'd got a cor anglais. So he said yes, and so they said, would he play the cor anglais solo in, is it William Tell?
Yes.
Yes, and so he played it. Oh, and everybody in Liverpool was talking, and they gave him an extra shilling for that. So he had 3 and 6 that night.
I was about 12, I think, when I first met Beecham. That was up in Liverpool when I was still at school, and he was going to perform Till Eulenspiegel with the Liverpool Symphony Orchestra. And at the rehearsal, he looked up and he pointed to me, and he said, who is that little boy playing third oboe? So my professor, who was playing first, said, that's Master Goossens, Mr. Beecham. Oh, really? He said, and has he a license?
When Goossens was only 16, Sir Henry Wood appointed him the principal oboe of the Queen's Hall Orchestra, at that time the most important oboe post in the country. At the audition, Sir Henry had been particularly impressed by the young Goossens' sight-reading ability, and right away he had a chance to put it to the test.
In the prom season, the first one I ever did, I read 2/3 of that season without ever having played it before. Sir Henry Wood said, don't you worry about it, Goossens. He said, I'll see you through. I'll bring you in when it's your turn. Sometimes I didn't trust him quite enough, and I came in on my own, but I was always wrong. But he was very charming about it, and eventually gave me the opportunity of going with them to Wales in 1913 on the Welsh tour. I think I made more mistakes in that tour than I've ever made before or since, but he forgave the lot and said, it's been splendid. I'm quite happy and satisfied.
Are your own children as musically talented as you were and your brother and sisters?
I wouldn't say that. They didn't get the same chances. In fact, I think really behind the whole thing is the fact that I wasn't so terribly keen about the fact that they should take up music, definitely, you see. In the case of Jenny, she had her own ideas on this, and she's a very keen musician. She loves listening to music. Indeed, they both do. But Jenny, I'm thinking of especially because eventually she chose the stage for her career.
How oft when thou my music music placed upon that blessed wood, whose motion sounds with thy sweet fingers when thou gently swayest the wiry concord that mine ear confounds. Do I envy those jacks that nimble leap to kiss the tender inward of thy hand, whilst my poor lips, which should that harvest reap, at the wood's boldness by thee blushing stand? To be so tickled, they would change their state and situation with those dancing chips, o'er whom thy fingers walk with gentle gait, making dead wood more blessed than living lips. Since saucy jacks so happy are in this, give them thy fingers, me thy lips to kiss.